I want to talk a little bit tonight about fire from heaven. Fire from heaven. Look with me at Luke 9. Luke 9:51. This is the only gospel where this story is actually told. Remember, Luke was not there with Jesus. He was not one of the apostles or the disciples. Luke came later during the book of Acts. But he was a physician and a scribe. In other words, he was a scholar. He was a man of letters. He was a man of education. And so he went about gathering the first eyewitness accounts and talking to the apostles, talking to the disciples. And we actually have some places in Luke where he actually talked to the townspeople where things happened. I believe that he probably interviewed healed people and their families so that he got it right. He made sure that it had not been changed in transmission. But he does include this story in his gospel. So Luke 9:51 says, when the days were approaching for his ascension, so it's getting time for Christ to be, lifted up on the cross and to have this over. He was determined to go to Jerusalem. It's his time to become the Messiah. He's determined to go to Jerusalem. The word determined is a wonderful word because it's the same kind of thing that we would say bullheaded. Okay? He was adamant about it. This is what he's about. His mind was made up. So he was determined to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers on ahead of him, and they went and entered a village of the Samaritans. Now everybody go boo, hiss when I say that, okay? Hiss a little bit. Come on, let me hear it. Hiss. Ooh. Okay, the village of the Samaritans. You're going to have to get with me here, okay? Video, we're trying really hard. So let me read it again, okay? He entered a village of the Samaritans. There you go, okay. He entered a village of Samaritans to make arrangements for him. In other words, just like in the Last Supper, remember the Last Supper, he sent his disciples ahead and made arrangements. And so they are used to this. They're used to getting close to a town and saying, why don't you go get dinner ordered and why don't you get rooms and everything taken care of. So when we get there, we won't have to stand around. Okay, let's stay with business. And at many towns he would go and he might preach and heal and didn't have to worry about the details. Go take care of that for me. So they went to make arrangements for him in this Samaritan town. Samaritan, what? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. When his disciples, because he was traveling towards Jerusalem, but they did not receive him. In other words, there's no room in the inn again. Okay? No room in the inn again like at his birth. We got no place for you, buddy. Keep hiking, keep a-walking. And we don't want you in our town. We don't want you here. Because he was traveling towards Jerusalem. Now, the message there is that the Samaritans believed that Jerusalem had lost its holiness. That it had lost its place. And that now the Samaritans, were the only pure believers. Okay? Now we know that some of that's absolutely true because the priesthood had lost its glory because they were no longer the tribe, of Zadok. They were no longer the Levitical tribe. And the priests who were serving at the time of Jesus were actually political appointees who bought their way into the temple. They bought their way into the priesthood. And if somebody came along with more money and more influence, they could have bumped them out and taken it over. So Caiaphas and Ananias were both political appointees who had bought their way in to the priesthood and were not the tribe that God had chosen to be the priest. So the temple was, in effect, at the time of Jesus, already defiled. Okay, we're talking about the defilement of the temple. It was actually defiled already because people God did not choose were going into the Holy of Holies to meet with him. Think about that. And how merciful God was, he didn't kill a whole bunch of them. When they go into the Holy of Holies, they should have died on the spot. But God's mercy said, and I'm putting words in God's mouth, okay? I'm putting words in God's mouth. But y'all thought you needed judges, and I let you have judges. Y'all thought you needed a king, and I let you have a king. Y'all thought you need these priests, and whatever, and he let them have them. But it was not God's plan this way. That was actually defiled. So when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Now, come on. This is the question that we got to stop and ask about. Why in the world would these two yahoos go there with their brain? I mean, had there ever been a time in the 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry where he ever gave them a clue that he might want to call fire down on somebody? No, never in a bazillion years would he ever want to do that, and would they ever get that from their master, and yet they're sitting there saying, you want us to do this? Go ahead, just give the word, we'll do it. You tell us. Come on down, fire, come on down, fire, come on. And remember, these are the same guys that a couple of weeks before were amazed that people were casting out demons. They said, we tried, the demons chased us out. And now they're calling down fire from heaven. What are these guys thinking? Where is this coming from? I mean, if you read this in context, you just go, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Where did they get this idea? And Jesus, that low, meek, mild Jesus, he turned and rebuked them. He rebuked them and said, you don't even know what kind of spirit you're of. Now, that's a real subtle way of saying, you demonic-filled, mouthy people. Because there's only the Holy Spirit and the evil spirit, and he says, you don't even know which spirit you're of. He's not complimenting them. This is a rebuke. He's going, you devil-minded people, you. What kind of spirit you're of? For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And the last line says, and they went on to another village. They literally were not welcome in this village. I just wonder what the people of that town will answer to when the father says, yeah, you remember my boy? Here's my boy right here. Do you remember his face? And y'all didn't want him there? Yeah. Well, just think, they may have the same fate and the same question as the millions of people who have been given the opportunity to make room for Jesus and didn't. That's what it is to be lost. That's what it is to be condemned for eternity. If the Lord presents himself at your door, the Bible says, today is the day of your salvation. They went on to another village. They weren't given another opportunity. They weren't given a clean-up chance. They weren't given a second chance. But we come back to that particular verse. Why in the world would these two, they're called the sons of thunder, so we know that they got tempers, right? We know that they both suffer from foot and mouth disease. Open mouth, insert foot, they got that. But in this particular passage, these boys really make a fool of themselves. And of all the things the disciples said, this reigns at the top of what? It floats to the top of why in the world? Well, let's just take a really quick look and remind ourselves where we are. Now, I know that maps are a little hard to see, but hopefully you can see that there's a yellow route, which is the route from the Sea of Galilee down to Jerusalem by way of the Jordan River. Okay, there's a beautiful road that took that way, and it was an easy road because it was relatively flat. And remember, you're going from the Sea of Galilee, which is 700 feet under the sea, to the Dead Sea, so it's pretty much downhill. It's a downhill walk, and it's pretty flat because it's a riverbed. And so it's pretty easy to get there from here to there. And that's why so many people went that way. And this is why 3 times we read about Jesus was going up from Jericho to Jerusalem, because that's the route he took. Okay? And people almost always traveled in caravans in those days. The disciples, it wasn't just Jesus and the boys. There were probably people around them and people traveling with them. And kind of like when the wagons headed west, they kind of waited until there were enough and then they all came together. That's how it happened there. When they took a journey from the north to the south, more often than not, they gathered up with other folks and they went. And most of them ate their own food and drank their own drink, but they just traveled in company because of the bandits and the thieves. And we read about the one about the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, that thieves fell on the man. So anyway, so we've got this eastern route here of the yellow, and then we have the red line, which mimics and follows that path of the patriarchs that we talked about, where Abram and Lot and everybody went north and south from Dan to Beersheba, and we talked about Dan to Beersheba for a couple of months. And that was the route that pretty much mimics the Dan to Beersheba route. And it's a very, very good route because it follows the riverbed, which is flat, and then jogs over to the Jezreel Valley, which is where Armageddon is, the big flat valley, And so it's pretty level. But it's really quicker to cut through the Samaritan mountains and go straight to Jerusalem. But you have to go through the Samaritan mountains. So it's hilly, it's up and down, there's gorges and things like that, and there's the Patriarch's Trail, which for the most part kind of skims around those gorges and is an ancient route. Before the time of Abraham, that road was traveled, okay? So it's really, truly ancient. And then to the west of that, we can cut across at Tiberias and go up over, again, 700 feet below, so we're going to go up. And then the mountains that rim the Dead Sea are about 600 feet tall. So we're going to go up about 1,300 feet and then come down to the Jezreel Valley and meet it there on the turquoise line, because that's all flat in there, and then take the Samaritan road. Or you can take the real Roman road. The Romans had the Via Mara, which means the way of the sea, the way of the coast. And the Via Mara would go way west where it's coastal plain. And you have to look for a hill. The only hill you get is sand dunes, because it's a coastal plain. Very, very easy. But if you take the western route, you're going to get your socks taxed off, because it's the Roman road and they got toll booths everywhere, and they're going to check what you're carrying, how much food you got, how much money you got, and how many camels you got, and how many people in your party, and you're going to get taxed. And so most of them didn't go that route, even though it was really the superior route and the safest, because the Romans were there and kept the bandits away. But people took their chances because they didn't have the money to pay all the taxes back and forth. So Jesus had the opportunity to go the yellow route, but this time he takes the red route. Now, whether or not he hooked up on the triangle, we have no idea whatsoever. This is kind of a close-up there. I don't know if he came over Tiberias or if he went down the river and caught up there near the Gilboa Mountains. But you see where the turquoise and the red meet? That's the spring of Gideon. Gideon's spring down at the bottom down at the bottom here where it's near the green and all that, it says Harod, Harod, just underneath the red line. That's the name of the spring that Gideon took his soldiers to, that you've seen pictures of. I've shown you pictures of it, and it is a full running stream of water, and it was a great campsite, because they could stock up on their water before they took off down south. And that's why there was a junction there, a junction of many, many places. Because I said, well, let's go over about a quarter of a mile and we'll catch the spring. And we'll be able to get water and spend the night there. And the valley there, now, they've capped all the springs. They've capped the springs. One of them is in the cave that you've seen pictures of, but the others are all capped. And they've made a water park. They've made swimming pools that are spring-fed. But before they did that, it was just a swamp. It was a marsh, because all the springs were coming up in the flat field. And so we've actually archaeologically gone about 100 feet past there and found all kinds of camping implements from throughout history. From the Turkish period clear back to the biblical period. So that's why it's really important that they meet there. But you see the little line that goes around that says Jezreel Valley and goes up to Nazareth? See, Nazareth is on top of a mountain. It's a very, very tall mountain. And that's why they took Jesus and threw him off the cliff. Because the Jezreel Valley is quite flat. The Sea of Galilee, 700 feet below. And then you have to get over these mountains to get there. Now, this is one of my pictures of those mountains, okay? We're on the eastern side looking across. And these mountains look forbidding, don't they? I mean, they really look, oh my gosh. And this is called the Cliffs of Arbel. And the Cliffs of Arbel are pockmarked with natural caves. Just caves everywhere. And the Jews went in there and dug those caves out and made them into homes and hiding places against the Romans, because the only way the Romans could get to them was to buy rope from the top. And they'd just shoot an arrow and kill them as they came down the rope, or they'd set the rope on fire. And so they were really safe in the Cliffs of Arbel. But when you look at it this way, they look very, very foreboding. But this is from the other direction, okay? We were looking across this way, but you see how many natural gorges there are? There are paths that go through the mountain, passes. And so to take that route over to Jezreel, that's the path that everyone took to go to Nazareth. See? Look at Nazareth back on the map, see? Here's Nazareth, and so you go over these passes, and then you come down in, and you stay on top of the mountaintop and get to Nazareth. Now, Nazareth was such an insignificant city and a little town. It was just a village town that had almost no road going to it at all. It's just a hiking path. It's just what the farmers took, you know, type of thing, and what the cattle took, or what the sheep took. And so there's really no road into Nazareth at the time of Jesus. So they just walk cross country and go home, okay, in that kind of a way. But that's kind of what it looks like on the Sea of Galilee there. So the journeys that they would take, if we look at the south, when they got to Samaria at the top on the red line, then they're going to get to Jerusalem through a pretty straight route. And even though it's hilly country, again, it follows the gorges and stays low. And it's a pretty easy walk to get there. This is what the Jezreel Valley looks like. Flat as a pancake. I mean, flat. This is why it's going to be a great place for the final battle of Armageddon, because all the armies can line up and run at each other. I mean, it's just flat as can be. But on the far, far right, there's a little tiny bump called Tabor, Mount Tabor, which for centuries we've believed, centuries we believed that's maybe where the Transfiguration happened. I don't believe that. I don't believe it was at Tabor. I believe it was farther north at Mount Hermon. And most scholars are changing now to that. But Mount Tabor is there, and in this picture, that's Mount Tabor, that dot, that circle in the background. Yeah, that's actually Mount Tabor. That's how close you are to Nazareth from the Sea of Galilee. It's less than an hour drive. And it's an hour because you have to go around the gorges. If it was straight, it'd be a 40-minute drive to get to Nazareth. But so Mount Tabor. And then we get into the land of the Samaritans. The Samaritans, of course, were the people who were left behind in the captivity of the north. The exiles were taken, and if you'll read the story of the Assyrian exile, when they attacked the north and conquered it in 782 BC. It was before the fall of the south. When they took the north, they left all the poor people behind. It says those who had no skills and had no money were left behind, because there weren't any threat to the army, because they didn't have any money and they had no skills, and so they were bumpkins that they could pretty much use as slave labor. The people that left behind married into the Assyrians. The Assyrians took themselves brides among the people that were left. The half-breeds are the Samaritans. Okay? They are Jews who married another group of people. So what do the pure people who got taken into exile think of the Samaritans when they come back? Yeah, you are just not pure. You're not Jews. You've given up the one thing we've got going is that we're Jewish. And you gave it up. You married it away, for Pete's sake. But the Samaritans say, but while we were here, we kept the law and we kept the commandments and we weren't taken into captivity. So there, okay? And so there's a hatred between the two, because the Samaritans say, Jerusalem fell, the temple was defiled, you went into captivity, And don't tell us you didn't intermarry while you were there, because you did. So don't you be pointing fingers at us. We stayed here and we watched the land which God gave us. So the Samaritans believe to this day that they are the pure Jewish race. And the Jews look at them as the dirty, married, half-breed group who gave up. Like they didn't intermarry, which they did. Okay? So we call that spin today, right? That's how you spin it. So the Samaritans still have a blood sacrifice for Passover. They still celebrate all of the festivals. I actually have shown you slides of the Passover, and it is a bloody feast. Those white robes are not white when we get through, because thousands of sheep are being killed and being put onto a spit and being burned in the burnt offering, and the cooked offering has been eaten by the priest. So they still practice all of the holidays and all of the holy days in the way that God commanded it. They only believe in the first 5 books of the Bible. Only the first 5. That's God's writing. Everything else is those dirty Jews who went into captivity. And so we're not going to follow any of that stuff. So there's still this relationship. But back then, people got killed over it. And some of the bandits who killed the Jews on the road were Samaritans. And some of the Samaritans that got killed on the road were Jews. There was literally a civil war going on at the time of Christ. And so for Jesus to walk into the enemy camp as though he belonged there and sent his disciples ahead and said, go get us a room and some food. And they said, but you're Jews. Remember the Samaritan woman that said, you're a Jew, why would you ask water of me? You think you're so uppity because you're on your way to Jerusalem and you're going to your temple? Well, our temple is the older and better temple because it never got knocked down. Boy, animosity between the two. Okay? So we go there. So why again the fire from heaven? What are we looking at? Well, look at Luke 9:28. Let's go about 20, 30 verses ahead of that, and everything takes on a different light. Luke 9:28 says, some 8 days after these things. Now, what's happened before is when Jesus took his disciples to what is Caesarea Philippi, way up in the north, beyond the Sea of Galilee, up near the Lebanese border, and he has taken them to the city of Philip, Caesarea Philippi, which is for the Caesar, and that's where the Pan worship was, the god Pan. Remember we talked about the Pan worship at Philippi, and this is the city called Panias, after Pan, Panias, and it's where there was a cave that water belched out of the cave, and that was the gates of hell. The gates of hell. The Romans called it the gates of hell. And they would take blood sacrifice and throw it into the spring. And if the water and blood gushed out and your blood came out, then your sacrifice had been rejected by hell. But if you threw the blood in and the water belched out and there was no blood in it, then your offering was accepted by the gods of the underworld. And so this was a place of really nasty things. I mean, there were goats there that were used as prostitutes in worship, okay? There was bestiality and animal sexuality at this place. And so it was not a nice place. And Jesus went up there, and it says into the region of Caesarea Philippi. Tells me he didn't go into town because it's too nasty. But he took them up where they knew where they were. Just about, not even a half a mile, quarter mile from all of that worship center was a Roman city, was a Roman town. And it's where Herod built one of his palaces. Okay? And I believe that Jesus didn't even go into town. He probably stayed out on the countryside. But this is where he said, the gates of hell shall not prevail against you. because the gates of hell were right there and they could see him in the distance. This big cave, and all of the demons and all of hell were represented, and the Romans worshipped them, the gods of the underworld. And it's where Jesus said, Peter, who do you think I am? And he said, thou art the Son of the living God. And he said, flesh and blood has not given this to you, but God has given it to you. And this is where the confession of the Messiah comes out, at the place of the gates of hell not prevail against you. You are bigger than all the demons on that hill. You need not fear them. So that's what's happened, okay? Now in 28 it says, some 8 days after these sayings, he took along Peter and John and James, 3 of the boys, and went up on the mountain to pray. Now again, most people say went to Mount Tabor, but I think he went on the same mountain he was next to. Tabor's 3-day walk, okay? I think they've hung around for 8 days, but they're still at the tallest mountain in all of Israel, the one that has snow on it and actually has ski resorts on it, okay, Mount Hermon. And so they went up to the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face became different, and his clothing became white and gleaming. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, and they were Moses and Elijah, who appearing in glory were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Wow. Wow. Now Peter and his companions had been overcome with sleep. How would you like to wake up to that? I mean, I fall asleep in my chair and have to back up the DVR to see what I just missed on my show, you know? And I'm disappointed I got to do that. I've just missed Moses and Elijah and Jesus talking. Boy, overcome with sleep. But when they were fully awake, they saw his glory, and they get to see the 2 men standing with him. And as they were leaving him, as Elijah and Moses were leaving, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it's good for us to be here. This is a hot spot. This is cool, man. This is where it's happening. This is really important. It's really, really, really good to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. Okay, we got 2 prophets and a Messiah, and let's build a tabernacle for all 3 of you. We got a theological issue going on here where Peter's saying, you're a prophet too, right? You're a prophet just like them. We got 3 prophets in one spot. What a moment, you know? This also makes me think, now again, I can't prove this. I cannot, this is a McClaren belief. I can't prove it in Scripture. But I don't believe that Moses actually died. I think he was taken by God. Because Elijah he was taking a chariot, right? He was taking a chariot and he was no more. And so I think Moses was taken. And now he comes back. I don't think this was a resurrection. I don't think this was a spirit form. I think that Moses, Exodus says that he was literally taken to a place where his body was taken by God. I just don't think he ended up in the ground, you know. Now again, I can't prove that. The Bible doesn't say so. But he does show up at the Transfiguration with 2 living people, okay? With Elijah that we know is alive, and we know that Jesus is alive. So they show up. Master, it's good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Not realizing what he was saying. Understatement much? While he was saying this, a cloud formed. God said, Peter, just hold your horses, okay? While he was saying this, while he's speaking it, while he's getting it wrong, a cloud formed and began to overshadow them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. The cloud was big enough that they had to enter it. It wasn't a little wispy thing up above like fog. This is a cloud that they're going, where's he at? Where's Jesus at? This cloud has substance to it. It has matter to it, okay? A cloud formed and began to overshadow them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. Then a voice came out of the cloud saying, hey, ignoramus, this ain't no prophet. All right? Says, this is my son, my Messiah, my chosen, anointed one. Listen to him. Listen to him. This is not a prophet that you can blow off and see whether or not what he says is going to happen. This is my son. This is the one I have chosen to lead Israel. That's code for Messiah. Okay? This is the Messiah. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent and reported to no one in those days any of the things which they had seen. Now see, it's important for Luke to write that because, again, he wasn't there firsthand, but he's getting it from the disciples. He's checking their stories to make sure that they match. And so he's reporting on the first-hand account and validating the story. Validating it. So that's really cool. So here we have the secret of what was happening later on in the story. Here we've got the transfiguration. The cloud, we've got Jesus gleaming, he's white. We got Moses, we got Elijah. Let's talk about Elijah for just a sec. 2 Kings 1. This is going to make so much sense and you're going to go, of course. Of course this makes sense. 1 King 1, the first 18 verses is kind of long, I know. But, or 2 Kings, I'm sorry, 2 Kings, yeah. 2 Kings 1 says, Now Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab, and Ahaziah fell through the lattice in his upper chamber, which is in Samaria. What's where? Samaria. Yeah, okay, it's in Samaria. So we're in the same area. I mean, Samaria is the same area. Okay, so we're in the same area, and he became ill. So he sent messengers and said to them, Go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this sickness. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, Arise and go up, meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, Is it because there is no God in Israel that you're going to inquire Beelzebub, the king of Ekron? God's literally saying, Go ask him, who am I, chopped liver? Is there no God in Israel? Who is he? What is he thinking? Now therefore, thus says the Lord, You shall not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you shall surely die. Then Elijah departed. Yeah, I get to go to the king and tell him, You bumpkin, you're going to die, okay? When the messengers returned to him, he said to them, Why have you returned? They said to him, A man came up to meet us and said to us, Go return to the king who sent you, and say to him, Thus says the Lord, It's because there is no God in Israel that you're sending to inquire Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. Therefore you shall not come down from the bed where you've gone up, but you're surely going to die. Oh, these guys get to come back with a message that Elijah delivered. He said to them, What kind of man was he who came up to you to meet you and spoke these words to you? And they said, It was a hairy fella. It was this hairy fella, and what was he wearing? Well, he had this leather girdle on, and he was bound, it was around his loins, and the king immediately says, That's Elijah. All you got to do is tell me that, and I know it's Elijah. He's Elijah the Tishbite. The king sent to him a captain of 50 with his 50. So a captain of 50 with his 50 men. And he went up to him, and behold, he was sitting on top of the hill, and he said to him, O man of God, the king says, Come down. Elijah replied to the captain of the 50, If I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. And fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. So he again sent with him another captain of 50 and his 50, and he said to him, O man of God, thus says the king, come down quickly. First it was come down. Now it's hustle down. Okay, get down here in a hurry. We mean business. We are serious. O man of God. Let's see, come down quickly. Elijah replied to him in verse 12, If I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. Then the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. Verse 13, so he again sent another captain of a third 50 and his 50. By this time, you're probably wanting to leave the military service. You're thinking going AWOL, right? Okay. So the third 50 with his 50, and the third captain with his 50 went up, and he came and bowed on his knees before Elijah. And he begged him and said to him, "Oh, man of God, please let my life and the lives of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight. Behold, fire came down from heaven and consumed the first two captains of 50 with their 50s, but now let my life be precious in your sight." The angel of the Lord said to Elijah, "Go down with him. We're going to show mercy." Okay? He came with the right attitude, didn't he? Came with the right words. "Go down with him and don't be afraid of him." So he arose and went down with him, and they went to the king. Then he said to him, "Thus says the Lord, because you have sent messengers to inquire of a false god, is it because there is no God in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore you shall not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you will surely die." The next verse says, "He died according to the word of the Lord, which Elijah had spoken. And because he had no son, Jehoram became king in his place. And the second year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah." Now the rest of the acts of Ahaziah, which he did, are not even written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. You can find all of this there, it says. It's all written down. It's a fact, Jack. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that the disciples knew that they were in the place in Samaria where Elijah had called down fire on the unbelieving king. And know that they're in that same valley, and that the Samaritans have denied their prophet. And we'd just been on the mountaintop with Elijah, and what did he do to the Samaritans? He burned them up. Hey, Jesus, look where we are. You want us to call down fire from heaven? Let's be like Elijah, because we were just with Elijah. And we're going to build 3 tabernacles because we're among 3 prophets. Look at 1 Kings 18. 1 Kings 18, very short, 36 to 40. At the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your command, at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, that you have turned their heart back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "Yeah, we believe in God." Oh yeah, let's old-time revival. "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal." Here's that Baal again. Okay? "Do not let one of them escape." So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. Now listen, this all happened on Mount Carmel, which is about 40 miles away, 30, 40 miles away. But the brook Kishon runs into the Samaritan hills. There's a really good chance that they brought them back to Samaria to kill them, because that's where their capital was. Let's go kill them in front of the capital and hang their hides on the fence. In other words, the disciples were in the spot where Elijah had called judgment. And it was only natural, having been with Elijah, that we do what he did. That's why they're calling it down, okay? Now Moses, we're kind of out of time, so let me give you the verses for Moses, okay? Moses, Exodus 9. Here Moses calls down fire on the sons of Korah, who have rebelled against God and against Moses. Numbers, he calls down fire on the sons of Aaron because they've rebelled and tried to do their own worship in the tabernacle rather than God's worship. And Leviticus 10. For the third time, Moses calls fire down. Now this gets real apocalyptic, because first of all, they get swallowed up by an earthquake. Then he calls down fire. For those that got away, and then a plague hits and thousands are killed by the plague. God was not happy at that moment, okay? They were not in a good place. We're going with a three-pronged attack on this crowd, okay? And so, is it any wonder that these disciples who had just been with Elijah and Moses, and remember, they know the Bible by heart. They can recite, the 5 books without any problem whatsoever. And they're in the place of the Samaritans, and they're going, you want to do Elijah thing? You want to do the Elijah thing? You see, it must be kind of a prophet thing to call down this fire. And they didn't see Jesus as anything more than a prophet. And what was Jesus' answer? He turned and he rebuked them and said, you do not know what kind of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's life. The purpose of Elijah was to destroy their lives because they had turned their back on God. And the purpose of Moses was to destroy those people's lives and to kill them because they turned their back on God. But the New Testament is, I know you've turned your back on me, but let me save you and not destroy you. So now we've gone from the prophet to the Messiah. And it's on the day that he has turned his face towards Jerusalem because he knows what must be done. Doesn't it all fit together now? Doesn't it make sense? It's in context now. We get the bigger picture of what's really going on.